What's going on, everybody, and welcome back here into the Refresh Network. So good to have you here, as always. You know, I've been getting asked the question a lot recently, what is the Refresh Network? And I think the honest answer to that question is that we're still trying to figure it out. Still trying to figure out exactly what shape the Refresh Network is going to take. But the one thing that I really continuously seem to come back to over and over again is that I hope this is a space for us to have very open, very real, and very vulnerable conversations about our mental health, because I think it's something that we're not talking about enough. And I think so many of us are facing this stuff when we step out into the world every single day. And I want this to be a place that is not only empowering for the people that are coming on the Refresh Network and sharing their story, for them to really step a little bit more into their truth, but also very empowering for the rest of us to know that we're not alone and that we're not the only people that may be struggling with our mental health. So as this continues to evolve, what I do know is that we are having another one of those conversations here today. We are talking to my friend Reece Anderson. Now, Reece works in a very, very fast-paced world, that is for sure. So he is the president and founder of Marque Consulting. He works in the events and hospitality industry, and he goes out, he travels to different events. He's worked on events like the Super Bowl, he's worked on the Final Four, he's done a lot of different things. And throughout all of that, he has been on his very own mental health journey, and he has struggled a lot with anxiety, as you will hear. And that anxiety really kind of sparked after a surgery that he had several years ago now, and he'll get into that more here in the episode. But I know that this was a pretty anxiety-provoking thing for him to show up and do this interview. As you can imagine, really talking about the real stuff and being vulnerable and being open can be very triggering at times. But I want to thank Reece so much for showing up, because that's what it's all about, and allowing us to hear his story. And I'm so excited to share this with all of you. And I really hope that there's some things in here that you can take away that resonate for you and that can serve you moving forward. So without further ado, here he is, Reece Anderson. Are you ready to do this?
Yeah.
Let's cheers. Ting. So let's go back to, it was 2012,
Yes.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
You had a surgery.
Yes.
That really had a huge impact on you, and was kind of a catalyst for a lot of stuff that you struggle with now when it comes to your mental health. Bring us back to that.
It was a week right around election time that I wasn't feeling so great and kind of fainty and weak. So went into urgent care to check that out. They noticed I was quite anemic doing my blood work and sent me to the hospital for additional testing, MRI, CT. And in doing so, they found a mass inside my stomach about the size of a football, and they needed to remove it. So there was kind of a dramatic weight loss involved with that, which was a little difficult to work through. But then, as you mentioned, like this, I do believe is the catalyst, but I didn't really start having anxiety and like depression and some of these more tense or anxious thoughts until probably like a year after surgery. And it's as if physically I was finally healed, but mentally it finally caught up to me.
And before this surgery, you were saying mental health wasn't really a struggle for you. Like you hadn't really dealt with any of this anxiety stuff before this surgery. So that was a real big pivot point for you.
Yeah, and it was strange because I'm an extrovert by nature. I like to be social. I have a great friend group, and I try to be as active as possible. And that's when I started noticing that something was really off with me. It was, I developed really zero interest in going out. I remember the day, so vividly. I had set up my first therapy appointment, and the days leading up to it, zero interest in anything, total panic mess. And I stayed in my apartment for, I think it was the 3 days leading up to it, total solitude, had no desire to be social, which for me really kind of scared me in a way, because I just felt down, and I couldn't like pinpoint the reason why. And from coming, for being someone that was so social, like, events is my life, hospitality is my life, like there's a lot of energy that comes with that. And the fact that I had none, I had to call my mom, and she had to drive, like about an hour out of her way to take me to an appointment that was 15 minutes away, just because I had like no control of how to get there. Anything that I was going to participate in, like I just dwelled on like the worst possible outcome, but like more in like a health capacity. So like, I'm having a headache, I must be having a stroke. Like there's a tingling in my left arm, it could just be asleep, but I think I'm having a heart attack. I was afraid of everything.
So that's a pretty common cycle for you, it sounds like, are these like sensations in the body of something creeps up sensation-wise for you, and then your mind is like latching on to that and taking you to like the worst possible scenario.
And then the feeling of anxiety is like, for lack of a better term, when I start feeling that coming on, it's almost like a cloud that's just like a tight rubber band like around your head, and it's then you start focusing in on that sensation, and then it just magnifies.
So for you, when that starts happening, how do you respond to it?
Like really trying to be aware of what's happening in the present moment. Gosh, I catch myself doing this all the time in my head, where if I'm feeling anxious and I'm out and about, say I'm at like a grocery store or a Target or something, like it's to ground yourself, I'll be walking down an aisle and I'll be like, that box is orange, that box is green, like that box is red. And then maybe I'll count things, or being like aware of like what you're touching, like, oh, I'm picking up this apple, this feels smooth, like just like being really cognizant of the present rather than dwelling on maybe a sensation that I think or am having in my head. I wasn't super open to medication initially because I just didn't want to have to rely on something every day. But in reality, had I not started that regimen, I don't know where I would be today without that. Like it really leveled me out.
I used to always have this kind of belief, because I'm on medication as well, I was on it in college, and then I was on it for several years, stopped it for a little while, and I was kind of like, oh, maybe it was working, like maybe it was helping, and then I've kind of since gone back on it. But I always used to kind of carry this belief that it felt like I was like cheating or something like that, right? Like a cheating on life if I'm like on a medication. And I think that that's something that needs to be talked about more, because it's like you've said, it's really helped you, it's helped me a ton. And it's just a piece of the puzzle. I think that's how I've always looked at it too, is that and this is just for me personally, I don't know that I would be doing very well if the only thing I was doing was taking a medication. But for me, it's like this kind of wheel of through, exercise, getting good sleep, medication, therapy, like there's all these different things I think that can like combine together to help us show up on a daily basis. Yeah, right? And a little like toolkit, our mental health toolkit, I feel like it's so important. Is there something that you think people don't realize about anxiety?
Yeah, that it's like a big hidden monster. I don't think people see what others are going through internally. It's almost like you can't find words to convey what you're struggling with. If you can put up a really good front. And you know what? I do that often. But just understanding that, it's okay to not have it all together.
It kind of forces you to be like really vulnerable. Are you finding that?
Yeah.
Which is a scary space to step into.
It's something that I say to some of my friends often, is that, you know what? Like, hey, on a day-to-day, like even when you see me, maybe you follow me on Instagram or any social media, I'm just like, that doesn't mean I had a great day.
Like for me, there's a lot of shame that I struggle with related to, anxiety and OCD and stuff like that. For me, there's days where I really don't even want to get into like the specifics of what's going on, but just being able to say to somebody like, hey, there's a lot of shame going on for me right now, or like I had a really tough day, like I'm in kind of a tough headspace. Like that, for me, that's so helpful just to be able to like step more in that direction of just being vulnerable and saying like, hey, I don't really have it pulled together today. This has been a tough day. There's something that for me that just kind of lets me like take a deep breath around that. As opposed to the way that I've carried myself up until, pretty recently, is to just like forge ahead as if like everything is perfect and that I'm not, and like internalize it all. So I think like any kind of direction of just like bringing other people in on the reality of what's going on internally, and it doesn't have to be everything, just that, at least for me, just that slight little like being able to be real about what I'm going through has helped a lot.
And piggybacking off of that, what I think is interesting, I mean, you saw when I arrived here today, a little on edge, a little anxious, and just in this dialogue that we've been having, like I have felt some of those anxious vibes disappear. So it does help to talk about it.
Totally. Because I think there's kind of this like separation of like trying to step out into the world and not honor like everything that you're going through and try to like hide something is such a hard way to live. And I really do think that with a lot of this, there's like the anxiety itself that's hard to manage. But then when you add on this layer of trying to appear like you're not struggling, it's like this other layer that just makes it like 10 times harder. And I think like that's my hope, is that through like more conversation, we can just like chip away at that a little bit more, and like let people just honor their struggle more. Because I think there's like something very grounding about that. What would you want to say to other people out there that might be struggling and that might be going through something similar to what you've gone through?
I think that don't be afraid to seek help. That I know for me was one of the hardest things. For anyone out there that might feel any bit of these panic sensations, or maybe they're not even sure what that feeling is that they have, is that there are so many resources out there, and everyone's toolkit is probably going to be a little bit different. Just, you're not alone.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Refresh Network. A reminder that these conversations are not meant to replace work with a therapist, so if you feel you need it, do reach out to a trained professional. Be good to yourselves out there, and I'll talk to you soon.